I hope your surgery goes well, Mom. But if you can't babysit next week, then don't bother coming back. That was the last thing my daughter said before hanging up on me. No goodbye. No take care. Just that. Sharp, cold, and final. I sat there in my recliner, the phone still warm in my hand, the living room around me too quiet. Outside, the late October sky was bruised with rain clouds, and my right leg throbbed from the bone-deep ache that made walking to the mailbox feel like a mountain climb. Tomorrow, I'd be in surgery, a full hip replacement. I should have been resting, gathering strength. Instead, I was replaying Caitlin's voice like a stuck record in my head. For 73 years, I thought I understood family. I thought being a mother meant giving, always. Showing up, no matter how tired, no matter what it cost you. My husband, Bill, used to tell me, "Linda, you can't pour from an empty cup." But Bill's been gone 11 years now, and somewhere along the way, I forgot that I had a cup of my own at all. Caitlin had asked me, no, expected me, to watch her youngest, Mia, every day after school, while she and Jared settled into their new business. I'd been doing it for 6 months already. Pickups, snacks, homework, dinner some days. I'd even driven in pain when I could barely press the pedal. But now, with the operation looming, I told her, carefully, calmly, that I needed a few weeks to recover. Just until I could walk again without assistance. I expected concern, or at least understanding. What I got instead was her silence. Then the sentence. That sentence. I lowered the phone into my lap and sat still for a long time. Even the clock on the wall seemed too loud. I didn't cry. I wish I had. Crying would have meant I was still waiting for something from her, for warmth or softness or some sliver of regret. But I didn't want anything anymore. Not after that. I looked around the living room. Photos on the wall. Caitlin at her wedding, the grandkids at the beach, all smiles and sunscreen. None of those smiles felt real anymore. They were things I'd paid for. The wedding dress, the honeymoon, the condo down payment. Even the family therapist when things got rocky between her and Jared. I paid for that too, with checks and long drives and casseroles, and my own body falling apart from doing too much for too long. My bag was packed for the hospital. Pajamas, slippers, a new novel I probably wouldn't read. The nurse would pick me up in the morning. Caitlin hadn't offered. Neither had Jared. Or the boys. Mia would have, I thought. But she was 9. I pushed myself up from the chair with a groan, my joints screaming. In the mirror by the hallway, I caught my own reflection. Gray hair pulled back, deep lines at the corners of my mouth, a softness in my shoulders that used to be strength. My mother had looked like that at 73. I remember thinking she looked so tired. I understand it now. On the kitchen counter lay the envelope I'd planned to give Caitlin for Thanksgiving. $1,000 toward Mia's orthodontics. No one had asked. I just knew they'd mentioned braces, and I thought it would help. I tore it in half, then again, and once more for good measure. The next morning, the nurse arrived on time, cheerful and kind. Her name was Olivia. She held my arm gently as I stepped out onto the porch, cane in hand. "Family meeting you at the hospital?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "No, it's just me." After she loaded my suitcase into the trunk, I took one last look at the house. The pumpkins Caitlin's kids had carved were still on the steps, sagging now. I'd helped with those, too. Cleaned up the seeds, baked the pies. Tomorrow I would wake up with metal where bone used to be, a new hip, a new wound, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. But not for Caitlin. Not anymore. The hospital room was clean, too bright, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish. I lay there after the surgery, half awake, half dreaming, with a bandage over my hip and a steady ache pulsing through the lower half of my body. The clock on the wall ticked away each sterile hour, and the nurse, Olivia again, checked my vitals, adjusted my IV, and smiled with gentle professionalism. "No visitors today?" she asked around noon, glancing at the door. I shook my head. "Didn't expect any." She didn't press. Good nurse. Pain has a way of making you honest with yourself. Between the anesthesia wearing off and the long, vacant hours, I had no choice but to face everything I'd been avoiding. It wasn't just Caitlin's words yesterday. It was years of small cuts, piling one on top of the other, until they became something sharp and deep. After Bill died, I made myself essential. That's the word I used, essential. I picked up the kids after school so Caitlin could get a promotion. I loaned her money when Jared's first business fell apart. I helped pack and unpack their house when they moved 3 times in 5 years. I made myself necessary because I believed that necessity meant love. But it doesn't. A necessary person is only loved until she says no. It started to rain around 3 in the afternoon. Soft. Steady. I watched droplets collect on the window like little truths lining up side by side. At 4, my phone buzzed on the tray beside me. A text. I tapped it open with a trembling finger. Mia, 9:04 a.m. "Grandma, are you okay?" Just that. No emojis, no spelling errors. Just a quiet question from a child who had more heart than the adults around her. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Me. "I'm okay, sweetheart." Getting stronger. She didn't answer right away. Probably in school. I pictured her at her desk, chin in her palm, waiting for the bell to ring. I missed her. Not because I had watched her every day, but because when she was around, I didn't feel like furniture. At 5, another buzz. This one from Jared. "Jared, hope recovery is smooth. Let us know if you need anything." That was it. A sentence built from obligation and distance. I didn't reply. The first night was hard. I couldn't sleep. Every hour the nurse came in, every beep of the monitor reminded me how quiet the rest of my life had become. I tried to distract myself. Watched the muted TV, counted ceiling tiles, listened to the faint sounds of footsteps in the hallway. But always, I came back to the same thought. What happens when you stop being useful to people who only see you as help? The answer was lying in that hospital bed, alone. By the second morning, the fog of anesthesia lifted just enough for the anger to settle in. Not loud anger, not rage. Something quieter, heavier, like a rock in my chest. When Olivia helped me out of bed and into the chair by the window, I thanked her. She smiled and said, "Strong lady, you are." I smiled back. I didn't feel strong. But maybe strength doesn't feel like fire. Maybe it feels like stillness. Later, the physical therapist came in. His name was Brad, mid-30s, too cheerful, but good at what he did. We practiced standing, then a few steps with a walker. "You'll be home in a few days," he said encouragingly. "You've got this." I didn't tell him that going home meant returning to silence. Or maybe that wasn't true anymore. Maybe silence wasn't something to fear. Maybe silence could be mine. That evening, as the sky turned dusky pink beyond the glass, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a list. Things to cancel. Weekly grocery runs for Caitlin. Mia's violin lessons, I pay half. Monthly utility supplement. Birthday trip I'd planned for Caitlin's 40th. Savings transfer. I set up last year just in case. Each line felt like a stitch being pulled out. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like unraveling. I was ready to rebuild. The hospital released me on a Wednesday afternoon. Olivia helped me into the transport car and hugged me before closing the door. She was the only one who'd held my hand through this, a stranger, really, but kinder than my own daughter. The driver didn't speak much. I didn't need him to. Outside the window, my neighborhood passed by in quiet motion. The same trees, the same mailboxes, the same brick houses lined up like old soldiers. But something felt different. Not the world, me. When we pulled up in front of my house, I sat still for a few seconds. My cane leaned against the door, a dull ache pulsing from hip to knee. I knew the pain would stay for weeks, but that wasn't what kept me from opening the door. It was the stillness inside. I used to crave it. Now, I feared it might swallow me whole. The driver helped me to the porch and waited until I unlocked the door. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and closed blinds. Nothing had moved. No dishes in the sink. No toys on the carpet. No evidence of anyone missing me. I lowered myself onto the couch and took a breath. The silence wrapped around me like an old shawl. Then I noticed the envelope on the hallway table. My mail had been held at the post office and someone must have picked it up. Probably my neighbor Doris. I'd have to call her later. The envelope on top was thick, ivory, with a gold border. Caitlin's handwriting. Inside was a card, a pretty one, with daisies on the front. I opened it, bracing myself. "Mom, I hope your recovery is going okay. We've had a crazy week. Sorry we haven't called. Mia says hi. Let us know when you're back on your feet. Love, Kay." No apology, no warmth, just a note to cover the bases. I placed the card back on the table and sat down again, staring out the window. Something inside me shifted. A line had been crossed, not by Caitlin, but by me. I had finally stopped waiting. That night, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one where I kept financial records, old receipts, gift lists, and every check I'd ever written to Caitlin since Bill died. I started laying them out one by one. The $4,500 check for Mia's preschool. The $12,000 loan to cover Jared's failed app idea. The grocery allowances. The car repairs. The college savings deposits I made just in case. I added them up. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel shocked. It wasn't about the number. It was the pattern. Every one of those checks had a piece of me in it. Time, care, fear. I wasn't just giving money, I was buying permission to stay in their lives, and now they'd revoked it anyway. The next morning I called the bank. A young woman with a pleasant voice answered. Her name was Caitlin, too. I almost laughed at the coincidence. "Mrs. Harper, how can I help?" "I'd like to review the automatic payments on my account, and then I'd like to cancel most of them." We went through them line by line. As she read each one aloud, I listened closely, stopping her often. "No, cancel that. That one too. Yes, all of them connected to my daughter's household. Every single one." There was a pause. "Are you sure, ma'am?" I looked out the window. The maple tree across the street was losing its leaves. I thought of how many seasons I'd let pass without tending to my own. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." Caitlin confirmed everything and made notes for the branch manager. I thanked her and hung up. I expected to feel hollow, but I didn't. I felt clean. Later that day, Mia called. "Grandma?" Her voice was small. "Mom said you were tired." "I am, sweetheart," I said gently. "But I'm getting better every day. Can I come over when you're better?" I closed my eyes. There was the rub. I loved that child with everything I had. "We'll see," I said. We'll see very soon. On Friday morning, I opened the curtains wide for the first time in weeks. The sun fell across the kitchen table, lighting up the grooves in the old wood like rivers on a map. I made myself a real breakfast: eggs, toast, black coffee. Not for anyone else, just for me. The phone didn't ring. No calls to ask if I could pick someone up. No texts asking for just a little help this month. It was the quietest my life had been in years. And it was mine. Around noon, I reached for the folder I hadn't opened in a long time, the one labeled Estate. Inside were neatly arranged papers: the deed to the house, Bill's will, my own draft from years ago, never finalized. There were also account statements and a copy of a trust I'd considered setting up once, back when I believed Caitlin still saw me as a person. That was before the years of polite avoidance turned into expectation. Before she started treating my help like a subscription, renewable, unlimited, and silent. I pulled out the blank pages of the old will. I didn't want to think in terms of punishment. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Caitlin had made her position clear. If I wasn't useful, I wasn't welcome. I was simply agreeing with her now. But Mia was different. That girl had spent hours curled on my couch reading, had learned to knit with me one winter, had once brought me a bouquet of dandelions with a note that said, "You are my best grown-up." I couldn't forget that. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Mrs. Harper?" A familiar voice, Caitlin from the bank. "I just wanted to confirm, we've completed cancellation of all outgoing transfers linked to the Harper-Bennett household. And your investment manager mentioned you might want to set up a new trust?" I looked at the sunlight still pouring over the table. "Yes," I said. "I want to open a trust in my granddaughter Mia's name, and I want it managed independently, protected. She won't have full access until she's 25. Caitlin paused, then replied, "That's very doable. We'll start drafting it today. Do you want us to notify the family?" "No," I said quickly. "Not yet." There was a kind of relief in that, like cutting a cord that had long since frayed but still dragged behind me. After we ended the call, I walked slowly to the closet in the hallway, cane in one hand. I reached up, painfully but deliberately, and pulled down an old photo box. Inside were pictures. Bill in his work boots, Caitlin as a baby, and one of me in my nursing scrubs holding a newborn Mia. I set that photo on the shelf by the fireplace. That evening, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Grandma?" Mia's voice, soft and uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Did you and Mom have a fight? She said you're mad at us." I took a long breath. "I'm not mad, Mia. I'm just making different choices now." She was quiet on the other end. Then, "Are you still my grandma, even if I don't come over a lot?" I closed my eyes, willing back the heat behind them. "I will always be your grandma, no matter what." She didn't speak right away. I could hear her breathing, then a soft sniffle. "I miss you. I miss you too." After we hung up, I sat in the armchair with the photo of her in my lap. There was grief in that moment, but also peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to win anyone back. I was simply standing up. The following Monday, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Caitlin's careful, slanted handwriting. I stood at the kitchen counter for a moment before opening it. I didn't feel dread, just a dull curiosity, like picking up a stone to see what's underneath. Inside, a folded sheet of stationery, the same soft cream color she used for thank you notes when she was little. "Mom," it began, "I don't know what's going on with you lately. Jared and I have tried to be patient, but the lack of communication is getting hard. If this is about the surgery, I already said we were overwhelmed that week. Things happen. That doesn't mean you need to overreact. Mia is confused. I don't want her dragged into any tension between us. She's been asking about you. I'm trying to protect her, but it would help if you could clarify what's going on, preferably in person. I think we should have a family meeting and clear the air. Let me know what time works. K. No apology. No admission. Just more of what I'd learned to expect. Pressure wrapped in politeness, control disguised as concern. I placed the letter back into the envelope, then into the drawer with the rest of the ones like it. The bills, the thankless thank yous, the Christmas updates that always arrived a week late with barely a signature. That afternoon, I had an appointment with Francis Leland, my attorney. Bill and I had first met him in the late 80s when we were rewriting our wills after Caitlin was born. Francis had been fresh out of law school back then, all bright eyes and crisp shirts. Now he was gray at the temples and slower to stand, but still sharp. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a warmth I hadn't felt from my own family in years. "Mrs. Harper," he said, gesturing me into the chair. "I got your message. Trusts, wills, changes. I figured something serious must have happened." I nodded. "It has." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. "Walk me through what you want." I told him everything, the canceled payments, the trust for Mia. The will I wanted changed. "No distributions to Caitlin or Jared," I said flatly. "Nothing." Francis leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his pad. "Are you certain?" "I'm 73, I replied. "I've spent the last 30 years giving without question. I am absolutely certain." He nodded slowly, then began to write. We spent over an hour going through scenarios, language, contingencies. He made suggestions, asked careful questions. I answered all of them with a steadiness that surprised even me. When we finished, he leaned forward. "Most people come in here heartbroken," he said gently. "You don't seem that way." I thought about that. "I was heartbroken for years," I said. "Now I'm just done." Back home, I made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey, just how Bill liked it. The house was still quiet. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. That evening, Mia sent a voice message. "Grandma, can I come over this weekend? I want to show you the thing I made in art class." I listened to it 3 times. Then I replied, "Of course you can, sweetheart. I'd love to see it." No need to run that by her mother. Saturday morning came with the smell of rain and the creak of my front gate. I was sitting in the armchair with my second cup of coffee when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, a rhythm I knew. I opened the door to find Mia standing there, her raincoat slightly too big, her hands clutching a plastic folder to her chest. "Hi, Grandma," she said, like it hadn't been weeks, like nothing in the world had changed. "Hi, love," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Come in before you catch cold." She peeled off her coat and kicked off her sneakers, her damp socks making quiet prints on the hardwood. I handed her a towel and watched as she dried her hair, her face shining with the unfiltered light of childhood. "I brought my drawings," she said, already moving to the kitchen table. We had to pick a word and make art about it. I picked strong. She laid out the pages carefully. Crayons, watercolor, glitter in places. One of the pictures was of a woman with silver hair and a red sweater, holding a cane and standing on a hill under a bright sun. "That's you," she said simply. I told my teacher you had surgery but didn't let it stop you. She said that was brave. I sat down across from her, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I don't feel very brave some days, I said honestly. Mia shrugged. Brave just means you don't quit. God, that child. We spent an hour like that, drawing, talking. I made her pancakes. She asked questions about the scars on my knees, about how Bill and I met, about why I kept so many picture frames but not a lot of furniture. When the clock crept toward noon, she looked up at me carefully. Mom said she didn't know I came, she confessed. I told her I was at Maddie's house. I took a breath. I'm glad you came, but you don't have to lie for me, sweet girl. I didn't lie for you, she said. I lied for me. Because I miss you. She was too young to be carrying that kind of choice. And I hated that I had become someone a child had to sneak away to see. When she left, I gave her a book I'd saved from Caitlin's childhood, a worn copy of The Secret Garden. Her eyes lit up. In the silence after she was gone, I didn't feel the ache of loneliness. I felt the ache of something older, recognition. Mia was my mirror, not in blood, but in spirit. She saw me. That night, I received another letter. This one from Jared. Typed, of course. Linda, Caitlin is very upset. She says you've been distant, possibly even manipulative toward Mia. We think it's best if communication goes through us from now on. You're welcome to visit, but we'll need notice, and only when appropriate. The gall, the way he tried to turn my love into a liability. The way he spoke like a gatekeeper to a child I had rocked to sleep and taught how to whistle. I folded the letter without finishing it and slid it into the same drawer where I kept Caitlin's. No reply. There would be no more explanations, no justifications, no bending. They could send all the words they wanted. I had said enough. On Monday morning, I made a list. Not a grocery list. Not a to-do list. A reckoning. People who knew what I'd been through. People who never asked. People who did. People who only came when they needed something. And the one person who came just to draw with me on a rainy Saturday. I didn't write their names. I didn't need to. I'd lived their patterns. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was how long I had tolerated it in silence. Not because I was weak, but because I had told myself a lie. That love required sacrifice, without limit. I sat with that list for a long time. Then I opened the drawer with the legal folder. Francis had called the day before to confirm everything was ready. He'd be by that afternoon with the paperwork. The new trust for Mia, the updated will, the clauses protecting everything I'd built from the hands that only remembered me when it served them. I baked scones. Not for anyone else. Just for me, and for the rhythm of making something from scratch. Francis arrived just after 2, still in his weathered coat, the same briefcase he'd had when he came to finalize Bill's estate a decade ago. He laid the documents out on the table, carefully, page by page. I kept the language clean, he said. Direct. If you want to include a personal letter with the will, we can add it as an attachment. I thought about that. A letter, not an apology, not a defense, just the truth, in my own words. I'll write something, I said. Not now, but soon. We went through the clauses, the signatures, the notarizations. Francis was patient, professional, but when we got to the part about disinheritance, he paused. You understand this is irreversible, right? You're removing both Caitlin and Jared from any future claims. I understand, I said. He nodded slowly. I've seen people change their minds. I won't, I replied. She already asked me to leave. I'm just agreeing. When it was all signed and sealed, He packed up and stood, looking at me with something like quiet admiration. "I don't say this often," he said, "but I'm proud of you, Linda." Funny. That word. Proud. I hadn't heard it from Caitlin's mouth in years. After he left, I sat back down at the table, the scent of lemon from the cleaner still in the air. I looked around the house, not grand, not modern, but mine. Bought with 2 salaries, kept afloat after Bill died with shifts I picked up, even while grieving. A home that had fed people, healed them, taken care of little ones who ran in and out without knocking. And now, for the first time, it was truly mine again. That evening, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. After it rang a second time, I checked the screen. Blocked number. I tapped the message when it finished. Caitlin's voice. Stiff, like she was reading off a sheet. "Mom, I heard about the changes you made. I don't know what this is all about, but it's not fair. You're cutting yourself off from your family, from your legacy. You're hurting Mia. Call me back." There it was again. Legacy. As if I were an inheritance, not a person. As if affection could be measured in balances and beneficiary rights. I saved the message. Not to replay. Just to remember the sound of someone who didn't realize they were too late. That night, I slept the whole night through. No pills, no radio, no tears. Just sleep. Wednesday brought the first real cold snap of the season. The wind pressed against the windows like a warning. I wrapped myself in Bill's old cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and pipe tobacco, and sat by the fire with a cup of tea, the signed documents now sealed and filed in the cabinet beside me. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Not a call, not a letter, an actual knock on my door. I stood slowly, one hand on my cane, unsure of who I'd find. Through the small pane of glass, I saw a girl in a navy coat, hood pulled low, a sketch pad tucked under her arm. Mia. I opened the door. "I told Mom I was walking to the library," she said. "It's only 3 blocks. She looked up at me, her face serious. "Is that okay?" I stepped aside. "Of course it is." Inside, she kicked off her boots and set her pad on the table. I made hot chocolate the way she liked. Milk, not water. 2 big marshmallows, stirred clockwise, not back and forth. She watched me carefully, like she was afraid to speak first. After a few sips, she asked, "Did you really change your will?" The question didn't come with anger, just quiet curiosity. "Yes," I said. "Why?" I thought about how to answer. Mia was only 9, but she'd always had a way of asking questions that required grown-up answers. "Because people who love each other don't treat each other like chores," I said. "And because love and money should never be the same thing." She nodded slowly. "I heard Mom say you were trying to punish her." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you think I'm punishing anyone?" Mia shook her head. "No, I think you're just tired of giving." That settled in the air between us like dust. I leaned forward. "Sweetheart, I didn't do this to hurt anyone. I did it to stop hurting myself." She didn't respond right away, just sipped her cocoa and opened her sketchpad. "I made something for you," she said. She flipped to a page, charcoal this time. A drawing of 2 women sitting across a table. One small, one older, a window behind them. Steam rising from mugs. "That's us," she said. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered. "It's beautiful." Mia put her pencil down and reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small velvet pouch and placed it on the table. "I know I can't give you money or big stuff, but this is mine." Inside was a thin silver bracelet with a tiny charm, a maple leaf. "I bought it at the school fundraiser," she said, "because you always say the tree outside your window is the prettiest thing in fall." I blinked back tears. "This is the most precious thing I've been given in a long time." She smiled, shyly. After lunch, grilled cheese and apples, Mia helped me organize the drawer in the hallway, the one filled with rubber bands, twist ties, and every extra button I'd ever saved. She did it like it was a game. When it was time to go, I walked her to the porch. "You know," she said quietly, "even if Mom says I can't come anymore, I'll find a way. I promise." I cupped her cheek in my hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Mia. I just stopped waiting to be seen." She threw her arms around me, holding tight. That night, I didn't think about Caitlin or Jared. I thought about a drawing, a bracelet, and a girl who showed up in the cold just to sit across from me and call that love. The next day, I turned off my phone. Not out of defiance, not even out of anger. I just needed silence that wasn't waiting to be broken. Instead of scrolling through texts I didn't want to answer, I pulled out the knitting project I'd abandoned months ago, a baby blanket, soft lavender wool. I'd started it when Caitlin announced a friend's pregnancy and asked if I could whip something up. Of course I said yes, like always. But halfway through, the request was forgotten, and so was the friend. Now, it wasn't a favor. It was mine. I worked on it for hours, letting the rhythm soothe me. Stitch by stitch, something old came back. A kind of peace I used to find when the world was quiet and my hands were busy. Around 4, there was a soft knock at the door. I hesitated before opening it. But it wasn't Mia this time. It was Doris, my neighbor. She held a small container in both hands and wore the same lavender coat she'd had for years. "Chicken stew," she said, offering it. "You've been on my mind." I stepped back to let her in. "Come in. Sit a while." She set the container on the counter and looked around the room. Still the same cozy place. We sat at the kitchen table and I poured tea, grateful for the warmth of her presence. Doris had never pried, never asked for more than I wanted to give. But today, her eyes searched mine a little deeper. "I saw Mia come by yesterday," she said gently. I nodded. "She's a good girl." "The best," I agreed. She sipped her tea. "You doing okay, Linda?" I considered lying, saying yes, saying fine. But something in her tone, quiet, undemanding, made it safe to tell the truth. "I'm starting to be," I said. "But it's been hard." Doris reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "You've been everything to that family for too long. It's okay to stop. You don't owe anyone your entire life." I looked at her and nodded. "I think," I said slowly, "I confused being needed with being loved." She smiled sadly. "A lot of us do." We sat in silence, the kind between people who've both seen too much and said too little over the years. The stew on the counter steamed softly in its Tupperware. Before she left, Doris turned to me in the doorway. "If they come knocking with guilt in their hands, remember this moment," she said. "The peace in your own home, the light in your own skin. Don't trade it for anything." I stood there long after she left, her words echoing louder than any voicemail. That evening, I turned my phone back on. 5 missed calls, 2 from Jared, 3 from Caitlin, 1 new voicemail. I didn't listen. Instead, I sent 1 text. To Caitlin, "Please stop calling. I need time. I'll reach out if and when I'm ready. No explanation, no softness. Not this time." The blanket in my lap was half done. The stitches had tightened where my fingers clenched. I loosened them, breathed, and kept going. I woke up early on Sunday, not because of pain or noise or habit, but because I wanted to. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt like the silence of absence. It felt like a clean sheet of paper. I made oatmeal, not instant, real, with cinnamon and brown sugar and half a chopped apple the way Bill used to like it. I sat at the table and ate slowly, deliberately, like each bite was a small act of respect for myself. After breakfast, I opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were the keepsakes I hadn't touched in years: old letters, Bill's watch, a faded concert ticket from 1974, a hospital bracelet from the day Caitlin was born. I found my journal beneath them all. The last entry was from 6 years ago, the night I co-signed the second mortgage on Caitlin's house. I had written about the relief in her voice, the hope in her eyes. Not a word about how I cried afterward, wondering if I'd ever get that money back, or the way she never brought it up again once the papers were signed. I turned to a fresh page and began to write. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just to remember how to hear my own voice. October 15th. I've spent most of my life being useful. I've been needed, leaned on, counted on, taken for granted. Today, I am none of those things. And for the first time, I think I might be free. The words weren't dramatic. They didn't bleed. But they were true. Later, I stepped out into the backyard. The maple was beginning to lose its leaves. Gold and rust-colored patches scattered across the lawn like old promises. I used to rake those leaves so the kids could jump in the piles. Now, I let them fall. I sat in the old wicker chair by the garden path, blanket over my knees, and watched the breeze move through the branches. It was enough. That afternoon, I received a short email from Caitlin. Subject: Disappointed mom, I've respected your space. But Mia is hurting. I think you're being selfish. We're trying our best, and you're making it hard. K. No greeting, no warmth, just blame dressed as concern. I didn't reply. That evening, Mia called. I'm not supposed to be on the phone, she whispered. I'm glad you are, I whispered back. Why are you and Mom fighting? I closed my eyes. It's not a fight, sweetheart. It's just, people sometimes grow apart, even when they don't want to. Will you come to my winter concert? I'll try, I said gently. But I need to know if I'm welcome first. I want you there. That's enough for me. She paused, then said, I wish I could live with you. A lump formed in my throat. Me too, I said. But you know what? You carry me with you, just like I carry you. When we hung up, I stared at the phone, not crying, not aching, just steady. I had stopped living my life as an extension of someone else's, and in that quiet, something beautiful had begun to grow. The mail arrived late that Monday. I was washing dishes when I heard the soft flap of the mailbox and the light thud of envelopes hitting the floor. I dried my hands slowly. No hurry anymore. No anxious hope that maybe, just maybe, there'd be a letter of apology, or a warm update, or even an honest question like, how are you, Mom? Instead, I found the usual stack. Utilities, a magazine I never subscribed to, and tucked among them, a thick envelope with my name written in Jared's tight, sharp handwriting. I considered leaving it unopened, but I didn't. Inside was a printed letter, clipped to several pages of typed notes. Linda, it began. After our recent disagreements, I believe it's necessary to have clarity about the financial arrangements tied to the Harper Bennett household. Please review the enclosed breakdown of past support as it pertains to co-investments, shared responsibilities, and informal commitments. My eyes skimmed the rest. Charts, estimates, vague references to conversations that never happened. It read like a preemptive legal defense, like a man building a case against a woman whose only crime was saying, "Enough." At the bottom, he'd written, "We hope you will reconsider your recent decisions. Family should operate on trust, not retaliation." Retaliation. I sat down at the kitchen table, folding the letter neatly, pressing each crease with care. There had been a time I would have wept over that, would have called Caitlin, tried to explain, would have felt guilt crawl under my skin like a rash. But now I only felt tired of the performance. I slid the papers into a drawer and wrote one sentence on a sticky note. Dignity isn't retaliation. I stuck it to the fridge. Around 4, Doris came by again, bringing cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. We sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. "You look lighter," she said, handing me a napkin. "Like you finally put something down." "I did," I said. "A few things." She glanced at the envelope still sitting on the table inside. "More family trouble?" "Attempts at negotiation," I said. "But they've mistaken my silence for confusion." Doris chuckled. "Happens to all of us when we stop nodding and start thinking." We sipped our tea in peace. I didn't tell her everything. She didn't ask. It was enough to sit beside someone who wasn't trying to fix me or scold me or squeeze something out of me. That evening, I lit a candle on the windowsill. Not for ceremony. Just because I wanted the warmth. The house smelled like cinnamon and old wood and quiet choices. As I got ready for bed, I passed the mirror in the hallway. I caught my reflection mid-step. Hair silver, sweater loose, eyes sharp. There was no softness left for them to twist. And strangely, I didn't miss it. Thursday brought an unexpected visitor. I was halfway through sorting the linen closet, finally tossing pillowcases I'd been meaning to fix for 10 years, when the doorbell rang. 3 short rings. I peeked through the window. Caitlin. Alone. No Jared. No kids. Just her, standing stiffly on the porch, arms crossed, chin lifted like she expected resistance. I didn't open the door right away. She rang again. I counted to 10, not out of spite, but to decide whether I owed her anything in this moment. An answer, an opening, a hallway she hadn't walked in months. Then I opened it. "Caitlin," I said. Not cold, not warm, neutral. Like a receptionist at a desk she didn't want to sit behind anymore. "Hi," she said, like it was a question. I waited. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the living room like it was a stranger's house. Her eyes scanned everything, as if seeing it for the first time. I wondered how long it had been since she really looked at anything in here. At the photos, the books, the chair where her father used to sit. "I thought we could talk," she said, perching on the edge of the sofa. "Without all the tension." I nodded. "Talk." She took a breath. "I know you're upset, but this division, this punishment, it's too much." Punishment. Again. I didn't reply. "I just don't understand why you'd cut off everything. The trust, the help. You know we've been under pressure. Jared's business is still—" I held up a hand. "Stop." She blinked. "I didn't ask you here," I said evenly. "And I didn't cut off everything. I stopped funding a lifestyle that excluded me." Her jaw tensed. "You stopped being a mother," she said quietly. I looked at her. My daughter, now 42. Polished, efficient, brittle. "No," I said. "I stopped being a servant." She flushed. "That's not fair." Neither was being asked to babysit while recovering from surgery. She looked down. That was one moment. No, I said. It was a culmination. Caitlin leaned back, arms crossed. I didn't come here to fight. Neither did I. So, what do you want, Mom? The words came out like a challenge, like a dare. I took a breath. I want respect. Not because I paid for your home, or because I helped raise your kids, but because I am a person, not a resource. Not a placeholder. She looked away, blinking quickly. Mia misses you, she said, quieter now. I miss her too. She's asking questions I don't know how to answer. Then be honest. Caitlin stood. I don't think you realize what you've started. I do, I said. I started putting myself back together. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, without a word, she walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned. I don't agree with how you've handled this. I didn't ask for agreement, I replied. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood in the silence she left behind, hand on the edge of the table, breath steady. Later that night, I received a text. Mia, Mom says you're mad at her. Are you mad at me too? I typed back, never. Some things don't change. The next morning, I opened the curtains early. The light came in pale and slow, the kind that makes you notice the dust floating in the air. I let it wash over the living room, over the quiet house, over the armchair where Bill used to sit, and the rug Mia once spilled apple juice on. I made coffee and let it go cold. Just holding the warm mug was enough. Then I opened the bottom drawer of the secretary desk, the one where I kept old papers, cards, clippings. At the very back was a small envelope with a name written in cursive. Eleanor Weller. My mother. She died when I was 26. I hadn't opened this envelope in decades. Inside was a note written in her hand. Being a mother is a long goodbye. Let go gently, but don't disappear. I stared at that line for a long time. I'd always believed I was failing that task, that letting go meant disappearing. So instead, I clung to their needs, to the favors, to the excuses. But I hadn't let go gently. I'd held on until I broke. And now, here I was, stitching myself back together without asking anyone to notice. I folded the note and put it back. Then I took out fresh paper and began to write a new letter. Not to Caitlin, not to Jared, to Mia. If you ever find this one day, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when the adults around us made it complicated. Even when silence filled the rooms. I left things behind not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring for myself too. I didn't sign it. Some things she'd understand better later. That afternoon, I received an email from the bank. The trust for Mia had been finalized. The legal language was dry, but the effect was simple. She would have her future, untouched by anyone else's control. Protected. Quietly waiting. I printed the document and filed it in the cabinet. Then I baked a lemon cake, the one I used to make on Bill's birthday. Mia loved that recipe too. I cut a slice and set it on the table with a note. You're always welcome here, even if no one else says it out loud. That evening, just before dusk, I saw her through the window. Mia. On her bike, weaving slowly up the path. She stopped at the porch, helmet askew, cheeks pink from the wind. I opened the door before she could knock. I smelled cake, she said simply. I smiled. You're right on time. We sat at the table, two women at different ends of life sharing crumbs and stories. She told me about her art teacher, her new friend who loved fossils, her secret wish to become a writer. I listened like every word was a jewel. When she was done, She took a crumpled paper out of her backpack, a drawing, a big tree with roots reaching deep underground. "This is you," she said. "You don't fall over when the wind comes." I couldn't speak, so I just pulled her close and let her stay there, in the hush of a house no longer defined by what it had lost, but by what it had chosen to keep. On Sunday, I put on my best coat, not fancy, just the one that still made me feel like myself, and walked 2 blocks to the old church with the tall oak out front. I hadn't been in years, not since Bill's memorial. The pews were mostly empty, a few quiet bodies scattered like memory. I didn't come to pray. I came to sit where I used to feel grounded. I closed my eyes. For years, I thought forgiveness meant returning to the same seat, even after you'd been pushed off it. Now I understood. Sometimes forgiveness means walking away, without bitterness, without spectacle, and simply never handing someone the power to knock you down again. Back home, I sat on the porch with my knitting. The lavender blanket was almost done. It was full of uneven stitches and places where my hands had trembled, but it was mine. A text buzzed. "Caitlin, we're going out of town next week. Mia wanted to ask if she could stay with you. There was no apology, no ownership, just a casual offer dressed as generosity." For a moment, I stared at the message. I thought of the trust, the changed will, the years, the surgery, the words that had never come. Then I typed back, "Mia is always welcome in my home. You, however, are not entitled to ask anything of me. If she needs me, she knows how to reach me." No punctuation at the end. No warmth, but not cruel either. Just final. An hour later, Mia called. "Grandma," she whispered, "did you say yes?" "I said you could come any time, sweetheart." She sighed with relief. "Good, because I already packed." I chuckled softly. "Well, I better wash the extra sheets then." When she arrived the next morning, she had one small suitcase and a book under her arm. No fanfare. No luggage dragged up the steps by Jared. Just her. That week, we made pancakes every morning, read late into the night. She helped me sort the attic. We found old photos of her mom in pigtails, holding a garden hose, scowling into the sun. Mia laughed. "She looks like me." "You look like yourself," I said. But maybe the best parts came from the parts she forgot. One afternoon, she found the lavender blanket on the armrest and held it to her face. "Is this for me?" "No," I said. "It's for the girl who reminded me that I'm still here." She looked confused. Then she smiled. "I know who that is." On Mia's last morning with me, the sky turned silver before dawn. I stood at the window and watched the wind shake the trees, the big maple outside shedding its last bright leaves like confetti for something ending, or maybe just beginning. She was still asleep on the pull-out bed in the den, curled into herself, one foot sticking out from under the blanket I'd made. I watched her for a moment, quietly. Her breath steady, her brow soft. She looked so much like Caitlin did at that age, and yet nothing like her at all. Later, as we ate breakfast, she looked up from her toast and said, "Grandma, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house next to mine, so we're never far." I smiled. "That's a beautiful thought, but I don't need a new house. I just need to know you'll live a life where you don't forget who you are." She tilted her head. "How would I forget that?" "You'd be surprised," I said. Sometimes the world whispers things to women about what they owe, about who they're supposed to serve or save or silence themselves for. And before you know it, you've traded all your time and softness for scraps of approval. She watched me. quiet, listening the way only children and old friends really do. "I don't want that," she said. "Then don't give anyone the pen to write your story," I said. "Not even the people you love." She finished her toast in silence. When Caitlin came to pick her up, she stayed in the car. Mia hugged me on the porch, long and tight. "I'll call every week," she whispered. "I'll answer every time." She hesitated, then added, "Don't disappear, okay?" "I won't," I said. "But I also won't stand still for people who don't see me." She nodded, eyes damp, then ran to the car. I didn't wave. I just stood tall in the doorway as the car drove off. Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh notebook. The front cover was blank. Inside, the first line I wrote, "This is not the story of a woman who was cast aside. This is the story of a woman who stopped asking permission to be whole." It wasn't polished, but it was true. That evening, Doris came by with tea. We sat in silence for a long while. Then she looked over at me. "You really done with them?" she asked. I thought about it. "I'm done waiting for them to become people I can belong to." She nodded. "That's enough." We sat, two old women in a quiet house, holding space for the parts of ourselves we used to hand away too easily, and I knew I was no longer lonely. I was alone, maybe, but not lost, not invisible, not less, just here, still standin', still me. If this story moved something in you, share it. Save it. Leave a comment. There are women out there, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who need to hear that it's never too late to come home to yourself.